There we go.
Oh.
Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DL Ignite. With me today, I've got Carl Smith. And Carl and I are going to talk about Agile and why enterprise Agile is not the future of work. Before we dive in, Carl, before we dive into that controversial subject, where can people find you?
So the easiest place is on LinkedIn. I use it every day. I probably drive my wife nuts by constantly looking at my feed.
You are a big user and poster of on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would, and it's not just crap as well. It's actually,
I'm engaged. It's a communication, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm in the first 100,000 users of LinkedIn globally. And I run 6 groups on it, LinkedIn, with about 120,000 members in the groups. So, and I suppose the interesting is I considered it communication all the way through. I've never tried to monetize any of that because actually, the whole point of LinkedIn is to communicate with people who might want to do business with you. Monetizing on top just seems like an extra layer.
Yes, and I would always recommend that the whole point of LinkedIn is actually about community. But and you're willing to take questions and comments through this as well, aren't you? You're more than happy to do that.
Yes.
So why don't you just give people a potted history of what you've done today? Because you've done 3 books, well, you've done 2 books, and you've co-authored 1. What have you done? What's your journey to get to where you are today?
I think my journey is initially from design, and people confuse design with graphics. So first and foremost, I'm a solution creator. And my solutions are based around understanding the problem rather than, Carl's got a great idea, everyone let's build it. And I don't drive solutions from my ego. I drive them from finding out what people are actually trying to achieve rather than what they ask for. And that goes way back to the design process. The bit where you see the 2 guys or 2 people, one with a piece of wood, one with a round circular piece of stone, going, oh, I wonder if they could work together. And it's that evolutionary process that humans have always used to understand how to do things better. And I worked through that through school and college, and I got a degree in design. I did a postgraduate in education because I'm interested in how we learn, not just what we learn. And I took that into product development. And I actually came across something called usability. And everyone's going, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, it's great making products and services for people, but if no one can actually use them, it's an art. It's a piece of art, not something that's functional. And I applied usability into software back in the 80s. And people are going, well, why do we care what users can do? And I go, well, these are the people that are buying your software or are consuming the software through the large company that you're building it for. Wouldn't you like them to have a good experience? Oh, do we have to? And I'm going, well, if they have a bad experience over a longer period of time, you can expect to not have them as continuous customers. So, and again, in the 80s, we were just coming into our own as consumers. I think so the 70s were quite dour, and we had very limited capacity to buy things, certainly in the UK. In the 80s, there was an explosion of choice. And that explosion of choice didn't exist in software. People had to consume the terrible experiences that were there. And so I got involved in usability, and I kind of questioned, well, usability is great because it asks what the problem is, but doesn't actually come up with a solution. And I was a member of various organizations, but they were all in the States. There was nothing in Europe dealing with any of these things. And so, well, shouldn't there be an output format to usability? The user's experience, as we called it then, and that's where user experience comes from. And my journey into Agile is actually from a consumer of Agile. Agile was affecting what I did as someone trying to make good products and services, and so I was concerned about. Firstly, I was concerned they took our customer journeys and made them their own. which was great because we'd actually stolen them from marketing, and made them our own. And then they had been taken into software development and being made their own, but they were actually losing some qualities. And I think, marketing was very focused on a narrow set of criteria. UX has got a much wider set of criteria, and then it went into software and had a much, much narrower set of criteria again. So I kind of followed user stories into Agile and became Scrum Master. And I did some Scrum work with teams, and it works. I mean, it actually works. I mean, normally when you hear about these things, it's like, yeah, we'll do it until it goes away, and then see what happens next. And we hear that all the way through the story of Agile. It's a fad, or it's we'll rinse some money out of it, and then we'll move on to the next thing. But actually, fundamentally, at its lowest level within teams, it actually works. And the things it delivers into people's lives is quite astonishing. It gives them a sense of community, a sense of power. It drives them to commit to much higher levels of engagement internally, plus also the quality of the work is so much better. I've been brought into organizations that later released products that everyone's heard of, where actually those projects were going down. They were failing massively. I won't name the final product, but it's one that everyone uses in the UK. And they had been working on it for 2 years and had completely failed to align internally. They all knew what they individually were doing, but they had never talked to each other. They'd never communicated. And I was brought in to bring in Agile as a Scrum Master. And there were no such things as an Agile coach in those days, just saying that now. And what I did was I just got them all together in one big room, and some of them didn't even know they were working on the same piece of work. I invented a success point, because they'd been working for 2 years and never delivered anything. And all I got them to do was to tell me what they were working on and to create a baseline plan so that we could do points poker. And at the end of the points poker, we had a celebration. And I got cakes in from Maison Berthaud. If you're based in London, you know that's the oldest patisserie in London. Beautiful cakes, and I got nice coffee in, and we just had some fun. And people got to talk to each other in a social level, and then we went back to our silos. But the point is that it was the first of many such engagements, and I think that way of working with Agile works really well. Now I should probably get to the point, which is the statement that enterprise Agile is not the future of work.
I was wondering when you were going to come to that.
Sorry about that, my monologue. So I've seen it work really well in small teams, and then over the years, like many other people, my level of knowledge has moved up. I understand lean portfolio management, I understand the finance, I understand governance at group level, working in enterprises. And I've written the governance for a number of organizations that are global, and nothing to do with Agile, just simply, making organizations function. And before the Agile transformation push, it was digital transformation. I was involved in digital transformation. So along comes Agile at an enterprise level, and I'm going, okay, let's see how it works. Give it a go. I mean, it could work. I mean, that's the thing, is that when you're involved in these things as a consultant, you're quite optimistic. Maybe you shouldn't be as optimistic, but you are. So I've got involved in a number of enterprise level transformations, and there have always been valuable outputs, but none of them have worked as they were intended to. And I think that's the essential point here. The future of work is not vested in grand scale Agile. And the reason it's not is because grand scale Agile itself doesn't work. It's based upon a number of premises that don't really logically connect. So one of the things that people talk about in Agile is that you can scale a pattern and bring it up to the whole organization and pass it out. If you step back from the statement and think about it, I want to scale a way of working in our facilities management into the trading floor of a bank. Wait a minute. They fundamentally do a different set of tasks and behaviors. How do I scale from one to the other? Well, actually, you can't. So, I mean, that's a drastic comparison. Let's just say I want to scale from infrastructure technology into application design. That's much closer. Well, what do they actually do in infrastructure? They create architectural patterns for large schemas and systems that create the standards across the organization. Application design consumes those standards, so that there is some parity, some connection there. But you can't actually scale from enterprise architecture into applications because they do different things. What you can scale is ways of working. So those are the Scrum meetings and the retrospectives and the sprinting and those, but you don't actually scale the individual ways of working. And what I see a lot of people doing is saying, well, we found that we work this way. And we're going, well, that's great. So that's a common pattern in your part of the organization, but it's not a common pattern across the organization. And this is where we are starting to hit off into that old terrible experience of business process re-engineering that we went through 25 years ago, where people created a model of a process of engineering principles and behaviors that everyone should be using, and caused utter chaos in organizations, sent some organizations out of business, and other organizations that realized what was happening threw the stuff away as quickly as possible, like it was on fire. And I think this is where enterprise agile is going. It's becoming I described it as an agile fall experience. Instead of waterfall, it's a top-down transformation. And I've seen organizations bring in consultancies or bring in individuals who basically take a copy of existing frameworks, rebrand it for that organization, tell them it's theirs, and then leave having made the money, run away with their carpet bags full of cash, and leave the organization to try and implement it. Well, actually, that doesn't work. We already know that any kind of change you try and bring from top down doesn't work. People won't take it. They won't adopt it. Now, I actually had a chat a couple of weeks ago with someone, and I said this, and they said, "Oh, we got it to work." And I go, "Well, where do you work?" And I said, "Oh, I work in the army." Oh, okay. So you kind of have a different situation, and this is in the US. I won't say which branch of the services, but they applied Agile, but they could order people to do it. There was no choice factor in it, and there was no way that if people decided to not observe the behaviors, it's not a question of being told off. Leavenworth is the other option. You go to prison because you're actually impeding the national security. And so this is it's a different working environment, and we don't have that in large organizations. So again, enterprise agility is based upon goodwill, and actually if people don't have to play, they won't.
Do you think that most organizations come to a point where they are, this is where we are as an organization, and then they stay like that? And one of the things is that people can't then innovate, can they? Because this is the organization that we came to when we started making money, and therefore what we're going to do is just crank the handle.
Yeah, and I think that's the nirvana for most organizations. That's what they want. They want to get to a point where they don't need to change anymore. And I think, if you go back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that model was fine. That because it was all new markets. Now all the markets are saturated, so you need to create a differentiator. Well, how do you create a differentiator? Well, the current thinking is you engage with the archetypes of your customer as large groups, and you start to fulfill what they're actually looking for. That's the current thinking. That means changing internally, because actually your organizational structure is not set up to serve your customers, it's set up to serve you.
Yeah.
And that's there's some really interesting material out there about how to think about your organization differently. But I think the larger the organization, the much harder it is to change, which is why my suggestion to people is don't try and change the organization. Select one customer journey, see all the touch points, and select a touch point and change that and see what you get. If someone says to me, "Carl, here's 500 million, go away and change my organization," I'd actually say no, because I know that it wouldn't work. because they would expect, a grand plan with all of these gateway points when I'm going to get delivery of things, and I couldn't qualify that as truthful. That would just be fake. And that's currently what people are having to do. They're having to fake the notion of what these deliverables are going to be, because their governance doesn't allow them to actually say, we don't know what the answer will be, but we'll find it out by experimenting. I mean, that's a horrific idea to most business organizations, but that's actually what Agile does. It challenges the status quo by changing in a very small level something that adds value. And I wrote something recently that if your Agile transformation hasn't delivered value in the first 6 weeks, you're probably doing it wrong.
And so what solution? What are you suggesting? What's your recommendation?
So my recommendation is that there's a couple of steps to go through first. The first one is to get adjusted governance. If you don't get adjusted governance, you may as well not try to do transformation. It's a waste of time and money for everyone involved. And by engaging at the governance level in any organization, some organizations are small, so the governance level is one person. Big organization, the governance group is a couple of hundred people. By engaging at governance, you make them aware of the desire to change. You set up an interface with existing governance and a way to work together. It's quite difficult and quite important, because everything that you want to change thereafter is based around what you're allowed to do. And governance exists for a really important reason: to stop the business from making errors that will end people in prison or have huge financial debts to regulators. So it's all for good reason, but we without having that initial piece in place, everything else will be crippled. So after governance, the second bit is financial management. We can change and rename anyone's job or role across the organization, but if they're still funded the same way, they can't really do anything differently. So if you can't change your financial management after you've changed your governance, now what I would suggest is, as I say, adjusted governance for a small part of the organization, focused on a customer journey, and then financial management changing to lean portfolio, which is, instead of financing programs and projects, you give a lump sum to achieve an outcome.
Yeah.
Now, as an experiment in an organization, most organizations already do that with proof of concepts. So they're already used to doing that. It's just that in Agile, people don't ask for that. They don't think, we want to do a POC around Agile. You're doing what? A POC around Agile is exactly the way to go forward, because actually you want to prove that it adds value. Because at the moment, a lot of it comes across as I say, people with sort of the carpet bags ready to take your money and leg it. So adjust the governance, adjust the finance model for within that adjusted governance area. Ensure that you're actually focused on delivering value, not just moving the deck chairs. That a lot of people will focus on reorganizing people, reorganizing contracts, changing job titles. I've heard people being told, you're a servant leader today. All right, I was a PM yesterday. Now I'm a servant leader. What's the difference? Oh, nothing. Well, it's a bit problematic doing all that. What you actually then need to do after the finance is define the work. Right. What is the work? So there's lots of work that happens in an organization, and it's called a work type taxonomy. You define what is the work types that you have. You will have work that comes as innovation, where you'll have work that comes from the business, either to upgrade existing or to support new concepts. You'll have work coming from technology. You'll have work coming from regulators if you're a regulated organization, and you'll have unplanned work. And unplanned work is not a bad thing. I'm just saying that now. Everyone says, oh, we need to get rid of all the unplanned work. Well, actually, unplanned work is just stuff that you didn't know was going to happen. And so unplanned work is important to recognize. If the government suddenly changed the plans and organizational format in a certain area of finance, all the banks would have to change overnight. The Bank of England would issue a statement, this is all now required. You've got 3 years to change. Something like that came out with my brain's on a blank.
Sarbanes-Oxley was one of the changes, or
yeah. Yeah, so it's any kind of regulation. Open banking, that was the one I was
Yeah,
trying to think of.
open
So open
banking.
banking, everyone's got to be have an open banking solution.
Mm.
You got, I think it was 2.5 years, which wasn't a lot of time for major organizations to deliver change. Um, so if that comes across, now that's a fundamental change in your business model. But the first response is, how do we deliver it through technology? Well, actually, we need to go back a level and go, what is the strategy that we're trying to achieve here to deliver these regulations? Anyway, that's a specific instance. The point then is once you have the work type taxonomies, you start to classify work. In one organization I worked in, we found that for every 10 workers, only 2 people were doing work that added value to the organization. Now, that's a terrible ratio, but it's not uncommon, because remember, the bureaucracy is created in organizations to deal with complexities and a lack of an ordered process. Uh, Organizations evolve organically, and therefore they have to put in more bureaucracy to manage the unplanned and unexpected risks that are created, and all these factors. I mean, one of the places I worked, we found that they had 9 design boards before they got to the design board. Sorry, 7 design boards before we got to the design board. None of those design boards were actually within the governance of the organization. They were all put in place so that people would sail through the final design board.
Right.
Whereas actually what you want to do is people not to sail through the design boards, but actually to be challenged by the people that are there who understand the systems better than them. We don't want them to spend a year and a half putting together a perfect PowerPoint to get through the design board. We want them to put forward their ideas in 3 to 4 weeks so that we can discount them straight away and stop wasting money on them, or prioritize them and put all our money into them. And this is again, thinking about how you work. So I think that once we work out what is the things that we're going to focus on, we then need to also do some strategic thinking. So the thing that I've been most involved with in the last 5 or 6 years is to get service design into transformation. And the reason for that is that service design is an ecosystem thinking, and it's also human-led. It always calls out the tech systems and calls out all of the subsystems and the platforms, but it's human-led, so it's based around perceptions, and those perceptions determine the overall internal experience of working for an organization and the external experience in the net promoter scores as well. So
We've had one comment in about governance. And I'm sorry to the person who posted it, because if you're probably not a connection to me, which is why it's come up as LinkedIn user, if you put a comment in what your name is, and I'll call your name out. But this person says governance spot on. Many people pay lip service to governance. Why? Because many find it complex, sometimes tiresome, and it gets in the way of getting ahead.
it does, but it gets in the way of getting ahead on purpose. That's the entire purpose of it.
Yes.
So if as I say, start with governance and in transformation, because those people are all working for the same organization as you. They all want the organization to succeed, but they just want it to succeed in a safe way. And so by engaging with governance, and in one of the organizations I worked in, I was working with 2 huge divisions, about 88,000 staff, but I was the link to the central governance at group level. And I found them and said, do you know what we're working on? And the project had been going for about a year at that point, and no one had communicated with them. And I'm going, yeah, okay, so we need to talk about how this works going forward, because you need to change and we need to change, because we can't have all of the things that we want to have because of some of the risk factors it creates. But you can't continue as you have been, because actually you will end up running the business into the ground with stale old governance. And they liked that. They liked the fact that we were willing to engage and reveal our hand. So they engaged, and we actually started to create a better governance model.
Fascinating. Carl, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been so fascinating and insightful. and I really appreciate you spending the time with us, especially in. I actually keep the junk out of here, so
I live in the junkyard.
but it's I always the thing I love about the pandemic is you see into so many people's houses, and it's I'm obviously a nosy person. It's always fantastic to see him. But thank you for spending your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me on. Hopefully, people found it interesting, and will still try to transform, but we'll think about it differently. We'll work at the team level. You can actually realistically deliver real value in an enterprise at the team level within 6 weeks, enough value to show that it could be something that could affect the entire organization.
So if people want to carry on with the conversation, best place to get hold of you is LinkedIn?
Is LinkedIn. I'm an open networker, and I will receive emails from anyone, unless you're trying to sell me stuff that I'm really not interested in.
Not interested, yeah. Carl, thank you so much for today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Thanks, everybody.